Hello and welcome to this Careers Unlocked minisode, brought to you by the EY Foundation. In this series of minisodes, we're covering topics associated with banking, managing your taxes, and personal finance. We know these topics can be daunting, but they're integral to the working world, so we've enlisted an expert to help us tackle some of the key questions on your minds. We're delighted to welcome Simon Morykin from HMRC's broadcast team to share some important tips and help us all understand more. In the last minisode in this series, we covered national insurance numbers, and today we're looking at seasonal jobs and national minimum wage. Simon, I'm sure many of our younger listeners may have part-time jobs that fit in with their studies or that flex around their other commitments. And sometimes in these situations, we know that working arrangements may be rather informal and maybe the wage on offer might not be what they're entitled to. So we know that in the UK we have a national minimum wage, but can you tell us a bit more about it?
Absolutely. So, Kathryn, the national minimum wage is the legal minimum hourly rate of pay for workers over the compulsory school age. So there are different minimum wage rates for different workers. That depends on your age and whether or not you're an apprentice. Now, the top rate applies to workers who are aged 23 and over at the moment, as it's January 2024. That will change from the 1st of April, when the top rate will be for people who are 21 and over from the 1st of April 2024. So these rates are reviewed each year and the changes are implemented on the 1st of April, which is why you see people telling you to check your payslip, make sure, because some employers genuinely forget to update it and get it right, which is why it's important that you check that your rate has changed from the 1st of April. And employers must pay that national minimum wage to anyone who's deemed a worker. So a worker is someone who's entered into a contract of employment or any other agreement where they provide work for services or for someone else. The minimum wage must be paid for workers all the time. This is really key. So it's not just about the amount of the national minimum wage, but it's also there to protect you for time that you are working. And that can include things like work-based travel, time spent training. You know, you might have a job where you have to open and close a shop up. Well, from the minute you start work, you've got to be being paid the national minimum wage. And that's where we see some employers getting it wrong. They're like, turn up, open up shop, then you start working. No. The minute you're doing work, you've got to be paid from that moment. And we find in some cases, Kathryn, people work where they've got to put on PPE or special equipment or clothing. From the minute they're starting putting that clothing on, they should be being paid. So they must be paid at least the minimum wage for all the hours worked in every pay period. That's the national minimum wage. The national living wage is the rate of pay for workers that go over 23 and over at the moment. That will change from the 1st of April 2024 when it will be 21 and over. So you've got your different rates. If you want to check what your rate is, go to gov.uk and search national minimum wage. There's a chart there that breaks down the ages: apprentices 16 to 17, 18 to 20, and 21 to 22, and 23 and over. That will change to 21 and over from the 1st of April when the rates change. But I'd say log all your time working and figure it out. Your employer will often go through this with you if you're concerned or you want to check it with them. But you can also do it on gov.uk. Search national minimum wage.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sam. That's so helpful. So it's really easy for anybody to find out what they should be getting paid, depending on what age they are. So they can find that online.
Yeah.
And something that I was going to ask, but I think you've covered it, and I'm actually a bit surprised. I was going to say, does every employer have to pay the national minimum wage, even if it's just, an extra couple of hours here and there that might be outside of the, normal working hours? But you've made it really clear that they do. And actually something that I'd imagine some of our listeners maybe didn't know is that things like travel and things like those extra opening and closing and changing into the equipment, that all counts as working hours, and they deserve to be paid their minimum wage for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is all workers. You might be seasonal staff, you might be a student doing a bit here and there when you can around your education. You need to be paid what you're due. And that's why I come on podcasts like this, Kathryn, to talk to lovely people like you to say, check your pay.
Yeah.
And I know it's hard if you're doing the odd hour here, the odd hour there in a pub, a bar, a restaurant. Keep a diary, write it down. You probably have it in your phone. You've probably got working today, 6 till 10 tonight. Go back, check it, cross-reference it, work out the hours on gov.uk with what you should be paying. And, most employers, you can go to them, Kathryn, you can go to your payroll team, can't you, or your boss or your manager and chat to them. They'll be super helpful in most cases.
Yeah.
If you find they're not, HMRC is here as well. So you can go to gov.uk and you can talk to us if you're concerned that you're not being paid what you're due and they're being a bit frosty with you and you feel you can't approach them. You can come to us at gov.uk and search national minimum wage, and you can actually put a report in. There's also ACAS, Kathryn, who offer free and confidential advice for any employment issues, and you can call them free and run things by them. So if you're struggling to work out, I mean, I'm no good with maths. So if you're struggling to tie up, the hours you've worked with your pay packet and you're just finding it a bit overwhelming and confusing, call ACAS. It's free and they will help go through it with you. And if you find at the end of it that you've not been paid what you're entitled to through the national minimum wage, then you can get in touch with us at HMRC online and you can report it.
Brilliant. Okay, so really clear advice there in terms of keeping a log on your working hours and making sure that you've got that record of what you have done and therefore what you should be paid. And if you are a bit worried about potentially not being paid the right amount, then gov.uk or ACAS, and I'm sure we can link those in the notes for this episode as well. Again, Simon, loads of really useful and practical tips and insights. So thank you for your time again today. And I
Pleasure.
know lots of listeners will have been helped through that. So that's all for this mini-sode. Thank you for listening. If you haven't done already, do check out the longer episode and keep an eye out for the other mini-sodes in this series. See you next time.